Lord Krishna's approach to the existence of God. A dialogue with the scientific mind. Introduction. Krishna does not argue, he clarifies. If Lord Krishna were to stand before the modern scientific community, he would not begin with miracles, revelations, or demands for belief. He would begin with clarity of categories. Krishna would calmly state, before we debate God's existence, we must first agree on what kind of reality we are examining, and what tools are appropriate to examine it. This single statement reframes the entire discussion. The problem, Krishna would explain, is not that science has disproved God, but that science is being asked to evaluate a question that lies partly outside its jurisdiction. 1. Krishna would redefine what proof means. Krishna's first step would be epistemological. Science defines proof as sensory observation, instrument-based measurement, repeatability under controlled material conditions. Krishna would point out that science itself already accepts entities that do not meet these criteria directly. Gravity cannot be seen, only inferred. Quarks were accepted before direct observation. Dark matter and dark energy are still hypothetical yet mathematically necessary. Therefore, Krishna would argue that absence of sensory detection does not equal non-existence, it only means the phenomenon lies beyond a given sensory range. This idea is foundational in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains that reality is layered, and not all layers are accessible to the same instruments. He would say to scientists, you already work with indirect inference. Why then restrict reality only to what your instruments can touch? Krishna is not rejecting science, he is asking it to remain consistent with its own principles. 2. Consciousness, the central unresolved variable. Krishna would then move directly to the hardest unsolved problem in science, consciousness. He would ask, why does subjective awareness exist at all? How does first-person experience arise from third-person matter? Why does matter behave meaningfully only in the presence of consciousness? Krishna's position is radical but precise. Consciousness is not produced by matter, matter is perceived within consciousness. This is not mysticism, it is phenomenology. Every scientific experiment assumes a conscious observer, intentional attention, interpretation of results. Yet consciousness itself remains unexplained by physics. Krishna would cite what is stated across the Upanishads. Consciousness is fundamental, self-luminous, and irreducible. In the Gita, Krishna describes consciousness, TMAN, as unborn, unchanging, indestructible. From Krishna's perspective, God is not inferred after consciousness, God is consciousness at its absolute scale. Thus, he would argue, until you can explain awareness itself, you have not eliminated God, you have merely postponed him. 3. Natural law and the question of intelligence. Krishna would next turn to natural law, which science takes as a given. The universe obeys mathematical precision, stable constants, predictable cause and effect relationships. Krishna would pose a deceptively simple question. Why should matter obey laws at all? Laws are not material objects. They have no mass, no energy, no spatial location. Yet the universe behaves as if it is governed by intelligence. Krishna would clarify. Randomness produces noise, not structure. Order implies information. Information implies intelligence. This reasoning is formalized in Vedanta through the Brahma Sutra, which argues that the ultimate cause of the universe must be conscious, intelligent, intentional. Krishna would emphasize, God is not a violation of natural law. God is the reason natural law exists. 4. Krishna rejects God of the gaps thinking. Krishna would explicitly distance himself from weak theology. He would not say, science has not explained this, therefore God did it. Instead, Krishna's position is, science explains mechanisms, how. Vedanta explains meaning, why. In the Gita, Krishna repeatedly urges Arjuna not to accept ideas blindly, but to test them through disciplined inquiry and lived practice. This is why Krishna offers yoga, not belief, as the method. Yoga, in this context, is a method of refining perception, a way of stabilizing consciousness, an internal experiment with repeatable results. Krishna would say, you refine microscopes to see atoms. Why refuse to refine consciousness to study consciousness itself? This is not anti-scientific, it is methodologically incomplete science. 5. Is there proof of God in Hindu scriptures? Krishna would answer this carefully. He would say, there is no proof of God in the way you prove chemical reactions, but there is something more demanding. Hindu scriptures offer a method, ethical discipline, meditation, devotion, a predictable transformation of perception, a consistent experiential outcome across cultures and eras. This is closer to reproducible subjective verification than dogma. Krishna would argue that the mistake modern science makes is rejecting first-person data entirely, even though consciousness itself is first-person. Pain, joy, meaning, and value are first-person. Human motivation is first-person. God, in Vedanta, is not an object to be observed, but the subject that makes observation possible. 6. Krishna's final question to science. Krishna would conclude not with an assertion, but with a challenge. He would ask, you trust instruments made of matter to reveal reality. Have you refined the instrument of awareness itself? Until science can explain consciousness without circularity, account for meaning and values, explain why existence exists rather than nothing, Krishna would say the question of God remains not disproven, but unexamined. Conclusion: God as the ground of inquiry. Krishna does not ask science to surrender. He asks it to complete its inquiry. In his framework, God is not inside the universe. God is not opposed to law. God is not a belief system. God is that by which the universe is intelligible at all. As Krishna would gently conclude, you seek truth with honesty. I ask only that you do not limit truth to what your current tools can measure. In this sense, Krishna does not argue for God. He reveals why the question itself cannot be escaped. Krishna would end the dialogue quietly, without argument or triumph, and say, you search the universe for its origin, you decode its laws, you map its particles and forces, But you never pause to examine the one constant present in every experiment, the awareness doing the searching. If matter alone were enough, consciousness would be optional, yet without consciousness, even the universe you study would be meaningless. Do not look for God as an object hidden somewhere in space and time. God is that by which space, time, laws, and even your doubt are known. When science turns its instruments inward with the same rigor it turns them outward, the question of God will no longer be debated, it will be encountered.